Hi everyone, I hope you're all well today. Following on our theme of is it better to take a break from drinking and set yourself a certain time limit, or is it better to stop drinking completely? I've had an email from Stephen in the UK. Bear with me while I read this to you. Stephen says, it's too terrifying to think of stopping drinking completely, but I find it easier to take a break. The trouble is, you're right. All the time I'm on the break, I'm thinking about rewarding myself with a drink. I'm counting the days till I can indulge myself again. Recently, I completed a 30-day sober challenge and ended up on a 2-month binge afterwards, which I'm just recovering from now. I feel like I'm trapped. I can't imagine spending the rest of my life without alcohol, but I also know I can't just take a break from it because I'll be back to square one again afterwards. Help. I'm desperate. Okay, well, first of all, Stephen, thanks for getting in touch. Thanks for your email. This is a very common situation that lots of us find ourselves in. When we've got an unhealthy relationship with alcohol, the thought of spending the rest of your life without alcohol, being sober forevermore, it's almost impossible to contemplate. We can't imagine it. I was the same as you. I used to take breaks from drinking alcohol because I found I could do it for a time-limited period. I didn't have any problem particularly giving alcohol up for short periods of time. My problem was staying stopped. So stopping drinking was easy, staying stopped was more challenging. And so the thing is, I think we get to a point, I certainly got to a point, and I think you're at that point now, Stephen, where you kind of know on some deep level that moderating's not going to work for you, taking a break isn't going to work for you, that your life is going to be better off without alcohol. The challenge is that you can't contemplate life without alcohol because it's become such a habitual pattern for us. It's become such a habitual and routine behaviour in our lives. So it's really challenging to imagine the rest of our lives without it. But here's the thing, stopping drinking completely doesn't have to be as scary as it might seem. It all depends on how you approach thinking about it. So if you imagine that stopping drinking and living your life sober is a new skill, it's something you haven't learnt to do yet. It's a bit like moving to another country and having to learn a new language. Perhaps when we first start thinking about living in another country, learning a new language, being surrounded by people who don't speak in our language, that's a terrifying thought. And bit by bit, you have to start learning this new language, and you have to start learning the customs, the cultures, and the habits and the way of living in this new country, and you have to learn the new language. And the first time you go into a situation where you're conversing with people who don't speak your own language, that can be absolutely terrifying. But bit by bit, step by step, you become more and more confident with it, until eventually you get to the point where you're fluent and you're comfortable and confident in this new country, and you're comfortable and confident with the systems, you're comfortable and confident with the people that you're getting to know, and you start to navigate your way through this new lifestyle, this new country that you're living in, and this new language that you're using. And this is exactly the same when we stop drinking and start to live life sober. When I first stopped drinking, I was terrified. I couldn't imagine going through the rest of my life without alcohol, because alcohol had become such an important and significant part of my day-to-day living. I built my life around alcohol, and it was really difficult to imagine not having that in my life anymore. But of course it's difficult to imagine that because we haven't done it yet. So in the situation you're in, Stephen, you haven't yet learnt to live your life sober. You haven't learnt that new skill. You haven't learned that new language. You haven't learnt that new country that you're going to be navigating. It's going to take time. And the really important thing when you go into this new life of sobriety alcohol free and liberated from all of that crap that alcohol's been bringing you. When you go into this new life, this new country, it's really important to go in with your eyes open, knowing that there's going to be some work initially, knowing that you're going to have to practice this new skill. This is a new skill you're learning. You don't know how to do it yet. So you've got to really consciously pay attention every single day to what's coming up. You need to plan, you need to prepare, you need to guard against certain trigger situations that in the past would have led to you reaching for a drink. You need to do a lot of planning, a lot of preparation, a lot of thinking. You need to put some energy and commitment into what you're going to do instead. How are you going to deal with things when you're challenged or you're tempted to reach for a drink? You've got to do all that conscious thinking and energy and planning and commitment and purpose. You've got to do all of that just like you would with learning a new language and learning the systems in a different country. But bit by bit, as time goes by, you become more confident. Every time you do something new, sober, you grow in confidence. And eventually what happens is, and this is the bit it's hard to imagine when you first start, what happens is you get to the point where it's all automatic, where living your life sober without alcohol in it becomes automatic. You're not even thinking about alcohol anymore. You're not worrying about it. You're not giving it any energy, any time, any concentration. It just gets easier and easier. When I first stopped drinking, I was terrified. Like you, I couldn't imagine living my life without alcohol, but that was because I didn't know how to do it yet. I had to learn it. So there is a process of learning when you first stop drinking. You're learning, you're practicing. You'll practice doing everything that you once did with alcohol, you'll practice doing it sober. But here's the thing, it's never as bad as you imagine it's going to be. Quite often it's easier than you think it's going to be. And not only that, quite often you discover you've enjoyed certain situations without the alcohol more than you thought you would. And if you're approaching it in the right way and you're paying attention to all of the gains this new life is bringing you, all of the benefits that being sober is bringing into your life, when you're paying attention to those things, it actually becomes more joyful. You become happier, you become more fulfilled. When you're focusing on all of the positives and all of the gains, it just makes it an easier route, an easier journey into this new sober lifestyle. And so when you're thinking now about stopping drinking completely and living the rest of your life sober, of course it's going to seem impossible because you don't have that experience yet. You've still got to learn how to do it. You've got to learn this new skill of navigating your life sober. But bit by bit, just like learning a new language, just like living in a new country, you learn to navigate your way through. And eventually you end up enjoying and celebrating your life sober. You don't give alcohol a second thought. Now, some people ask me, well, how long does this take? I've been sober for 4 months now, and I'm still having to really work hard at it. I'm still having to pay attention to it. Well, the answer to that question is it varies from person to person. It took me about 3 months before I was enjoying living life sober, before I was starting to feel more confident with it, before I'd lost some of the anxiety and some of the depression symptoms that I'd had, before I started to feel like I was more myself again. It probably took me, and this is such a long time ago now, I'm struggling to remember, but it probably took me between about 9 months to a year to actually feel super confident and that I wasn't having to give alcohol much attention or energy at all anymore. And there were still situations, even after a year for me, that when I was going into that situation for the first time sober, it was still work. It still took some energy and I'd still have to think in advance, okay, so what am I going to do instead here of not drinking? And I'd have to plan and prepare for it. But for me, about a year and a half into living life sober, I haven't given alcohol a second thought. I give it no energy. It doesn't enter my mind. I don't feel like drinking. I don't desire a drink. I have no urges to drink. If you're desperate and if you can't imagine stopping drinking completely and living the rest of your life sober, that's fine. It is possible to do it in chunks. Set yourself a 30-day challenge. But just know that at the end of that challenge, unless you're going to carry on and set yourself another 30 days or a 2-month or a 3-month challenge and keep setting yourself fresh goalposts and fresh targets, unless you do that and you carry on with sobriety, you're going to be back to square one again. And just like Stephen, it's likely that you're going to end up rewarding yourself with drinking and getting back into that drinking cycle. So stopping drinking completely, although it might feel scary at first, it's one of those things you've just got to take day by day, plan and prepare for each day when you first start in the early days, and gradually, over time, you need to do less planning, less preparation, you gain in confidence, you start learning this new skill of living life sober more and more competently, and you become confident with your sobriety and you stop thinking about alcohol. And eventually you get to the point where you can't even remember, like me now. I can't remember how bad it used to feel. That's like, I can't remember how I used to be. That seems like an old version of myself back then when I was drinking. You've just got to have the motivation and the determination and have your eyes open so that you know what to expect. I'm really interested to hear your stories about when you've taken a break from drinking or you've set yourself time-limited challenges and how you've managed that, or whether you found it easier to just stop drinking completely. And if you did that, how did you approach that? How did you think about stopping drinking completely? Do let me know in the comments below. For more stories, experiences, encouragement and support on stopping drinking and living your life happily and healthily sober, you can subscribe to my channel. I'll look forward to catching up with you next time, but in the meantime, let's go get sober together.